Welcome to the Stoned Heen View, a podcast series which interviews a range of sport club representatives and leading professional sport club personnel during the COVID-19 shutdown. We find out what these people are doing during the current health crisis with some of our most popular sports seasons postponed. I'm Mark Heenan, and today I'm joined by my summer series co-host for the Stoned Heen View podcast, and it's Ben Carbonaro. And welcome, Ben. And before we get you on the program, you obviously run two podcasts in conjunction with this, and two of your passions are netball and racing. And previously we had Liz Ellis on our podcast that we interviewed, and we've got a racing person today. So this is your world, and we are looking forward to this person because I know this person pretty well as well.
Yep, we are, and thanks again for the opportunity, Mark. I'm a good mate of yours and more than happy to help you out. And joining us today is the track manager from the Geelong Racing Club in James Jimmy Dalton. Good morning, Jimmy. How are you, mate?
Good, Ben. How you going?
Yeah, very well, thank you. First of all, what was it like having the Geelong Cup this year, which is obviously your feature meeting every year without a crowd?
Yes, it was quite different, Ben. It was no crowds for the whole of sort of winter into summer. And look, it was good to be able to focus on the track on its own and not have to sort of worry about the crowd aspect of it. But when the day came and the races were won and run, it was a little bit flat, not having the enthusiasm and the vibrance that the crowd can give you on those days.
Next question is obviously with regards to a race track season. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, racing has, even though you haven't had crowds, you've been able to still run race meetings. I mean, you know, essentially what this podcast is about sports clubs and people that have suffered because, you know, their sport hasn't run and they've had to, you know, have so many other parameters. Yes, you haven't had any crowds, but you've still been able to have race meetings. So do you think in some ways that racing is one of the affordable sports that's had a bit of luxury as opposed to a lot of other sports?
Yeah, look, I think you're right. I think the industry's done a fantastic job of being able to keep the sport going when a lot of other sports had to pull the pin. I think the way that we're in an outdoor sport and jockeys can sort of segregate themselves, there's been a lot of sort of strict fire security measures to keep us running, and I think it just worked perfectly that this game could continue on when so many other sports unfortunately couldn't.
Unfortunately, there was only one breach, and that was, I think, jockey Mark Zara. There was a bit of a scare there, but luckily, like you said, Jimmy, the whole industry has been able to run, and I think it's been a beacon of light for just the wider sporting industry. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. I think in the depths of winter when there wasn't a whole lot going on, to be able to turn on Channel 78 and see horses and some form of sport going, it was brilliant. There was that scare early on with Mark being on a similar flight to another COVID positive, but lucky enough there was no contact made. So it was a slight little scare, but we were able to continue on. And like I said earlier, the rules and regs that have been put in place by the industry have been fantastic to make sure that we've been able to continue on. It's definitely been a beacon of light for everyone.
So you've had a lot of race meetings even post Geelong Cup. There was one on the 11th of December at the Geelong Racing Club. There was a Tuesday race meeting on the 22nd of September. By the time we edit and put this podcast up, you've got the Boxing Day races, and then there's another race on the 7th of Jan and the 15th of Jan. I mean, I suppose in some ways, you know, if you look at a cricket curator, they've got, you know, so many different pitches that they have to prepare and all that. How does a track like the Geelong Racing Club recover with so many race meetings in such a short amount of time?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, that's for sure. We are actually pretty much the busiest club in Victoria, believe it or not. Sandown hold a few more race meetings, but they've effectively got two tracks, whereas we've just got the one track. So, look, it's definitely a challenge. We plan all our rail moves sort of 6 to 12 months in advance of where our rail moves to cover wear and tear and all this sort of thing. Our fertiliser and nutrition plan has to be spot on. and also aeration and just basically our general turf management techniques. You just can't really miss a beat, because it only takes one poor race meeting or one meet where we really cop some wear and tear, and it can really set us back for future race meetings. So we've really got to always have our finger on the pulse and make sure that we're preparing for race meets that might be 5, 6, 7 race meets away, but you're looking at them months and months in advance. So it's a challenge, but my staff and we work really hard, and I'm fortunate to have a great staff to support and make sure the track's in really good condition each time we come to race.
With the removal of the synthetic track, Jimmy, would you say there's therefore a bit more pressure then to ensure that the turf track is always in optimum condition? Because I know that synthetic track used to host a lot of meetings in the winter before RVL made the decision, we want to move those meetings that would usually be with you guys to Ballarat.
Yeah, for sure. We've upped our grass meetings during the winter period, which definitely is challenging. That's that harder time to race and have your track being able to recover. Obviously, the cooler weather, not much sun, the daylight hours are a lot shorter, so recovery is at a minimum. They're the most challenging times of our year here at Geelong, June, July, August, and making sure we can try and back up. The soil profile here at Geelong is quite heavy, so it really does hold on to the moisture, and often we find throughout those winter months that we are on heavy tracks. It definitely is a challenge. We do miss the synthetic and being able to potentially switch over to it when conditions aren't favourable. But now that it's gone, we just have to do the best we can with what we've got and make sure that our practices are 100% ready for those winter meets.
Jimmy, I was reading an article when you left, obviously, the stables at Conowari or close to Barwon Heads at Danny O'Brien's training venue out there, and then you went to the Geelong Racing Club. I mean, obviously, I suppose in some ways, one of the things that you probably have to manage is not so much people, but that, you've got a venue. And I was lucky enough to go out with, to come out to that venue a number of years ago, and you showed me around, and, it was a great venue, not far from 13th Beach and those sorts of things. I mean, what are some of the learnings that you've taken from that role into this role? And is the substantial difference is that you're preparing a track for race days, whereas you really got a training venue at Danny O'Brien? What are some of the big differences? Yeah,
that's for sure. I think turf management wise, I felt I was always competent and capable. So moving from golf courses to racetracks and from the training facility into here, I always felt confident enough to be able to prepare a track. So the biggest difference, I think, was building relationships with all the different key stakeholders within the whole industry, from trainers to jockeys to stewards to your own staff to owners and all this sort of thing. It's quite a wide variety of different stakeholders. And I probably found that the most challenging aspect of it early on. Preparing Barwon Heads for Danny O'Brien, I just had to please Danny O'Brien. When I come here to Geelong, we've got 50 trainers that call Geelong their training base and bring horses here each day to do track work and these sorts of things. So different trainers have different priorities on how their track should be prepared and how they look and these sorts of things. So I think that was definitely the biggest challenge that I found, just being able to build relationships with those people and understand what makes them tick, what they want, what pleases them, but also they needed to work out, from my point of view, the track here requires certain amounts of rest and recovery. So certain times of the week, grass availability won't be there for them and these sorts of things. So that was definitely the biggest issue for me, just building relationships with everyone. And race days I hadn't encountered, obviously, out at the training track. So that was another thing that I had to learn pretty quick. But as I said earlier, I was pretty fortunate with the staff I've walked into and inherited, that they're really experienced in race day preparation, from moving the barriers to moving rail and all these sorts of things that I didn't have a lot of experience with, but my staff did. So they're probably the two biggest differences, all the different stakeholders I have to work with, and also just the race day experience.
Talk about forming relationships with everyone. One of the more colourful characters down there you would have encountered is Mr. Bryce Stanaway. Bryce certainly isn't short of a word, and he's always got something to say, doesn't he, Jimmy?
Oh, he sure does, yeah. Bryce, you know, he's on the phone probably weekly to me, which is fine. I've got a good relationship with Bryce. Obviously, his main issue in the industry is horse welfare and the way tracks are prepared. And look, I'm open to everybody's opinion and everyone's thoughts on how tracks should be prepared. It's part of my job. Bryce does prefer giving the ground, which is fine, and horses do need that. So always at the forefront of my mind when preparing a track for races is to have sufficient give. We're asked to prepare a track to start on a good 4 and stay in the good range all day. Whether or not it gets upgraded to a good 3 or not depends on weather conditions and how much irrigation's been put on the track during the week. I think in Bryce's world, he'd prepare to have a track in the softer range and potentially maybe upgrade later in the day to a good range, which is fine. Our guidelines suggest we start on a good 4 and have it in that good range for the whole day. But he is a colourful character. We get along well. We have some good debates about how things should be prepared. But Bryce isn't the only one that he's only too happy to offer his opinion, and that's fine as well. It's part of my job to speak to all those trainers and try and make out what works best for everyone.
Part of this podcast, Jimmy, is talking about how people are affected during COVID and their roles during this, this year. It's been an unusual year, and as again, thank you for joining us. Obviously, last podcast for 2020, but we're in our summer series. So, whether it's irrigation or fertilizer or, it's having race meetings without crowds. I mean, what are some of the things that I suppose you've been at the racing club for a little while now that you've had to deal with around COVID? How's your life sort of changed around planning a racetrack and maybe getting the supplies to make the racetrack get it in the best condition? How's that sort of impacted the role that you do at the racing club, particularly for this year?
Yeah, I think early on, before we really knew what was going to happen, like going back to March, I think straight away the budget was the biggest thing that we had to look at and say, where can we pull up as far as all our budget items? And it was pretty early on that the government did introduce the JobKeeper initiative, which was fantastic for us. So we were able to pretty much continue as per normal with my budget as far as fertilizers, soil, seed, and these sorts of things. It didn't change because we did actually continue. As you know, the racing game did continue, and the standards of the track were always going to be high, regardless of COVID or not. So we couldn't really cut back on the presentation of the track at all. It had to stay A1. Some of the things that potentially were put to the back seat a little bit were probably the grounds and the gardens and these sorts of things. Not that we've got a great deal of them, but not having to prepare those areas for crowds to come was somewhere where we could tighten up the purse strings in that regard. So to be honest, a whole lot really didn't change. We still had to come to work. We still had to prepare the tracks. The biggest thing for us was all those biosecurity measures that RV introduced to make sure racing kept going, which included the segregation of the jockeys. So we had to have 2 jockeys rooms in case one there's a green and the gold team, for example. So if there was a person from the gold team that was to contract COVID throughout that time, it was the gold team that may have been affected, and the green team would be able to continue on. So keeping all the jockeys segregated was a big thing, and really just all our sanitisation of all our equipment on race days, including the barriers. We had to just work in with barrier attendants, starters, all these sorts of things to make sure everything was sanitised after each race, even the back of the gates, the handles, these sorts of things. But as far as the track and its preparation, it just didn't change because, as I said, we continued to race and we had to prepare the track to the best of our ability.
But by the sounds of it, then Jimmy, it looks like, or it sounds like more specifically, everything was pretty seamless. Everyone did their bit, and you haven't had any issues so far down there in Geelong with regards to sanitisation or anything like that.
No, that's right. No, we were really lucky to keep going. Temperature testing was a big thing as well for all staff, but then also for all trainers that come to the property every day. You know, we have over 100 people, including stable hands, track riders, trainers. So they were sort of some of the challenges just to get everybody on board with, we're going through a pandemic. These are the things that have to occur to continue to race. But credit to everyone, credit to all the participants that everyone towed the line and abided by what needed to happen to continue to go. And look, we're not through it yet, obviously. We still test on race days, and the signage and the awareness about COVID. And look, if you're not feeling well, then you just don't come to work. You go and get checked up to make sure you're okay. These sorts of things are still continuing to make sure we're going to be okay.
Now, Benny, I've known James Dalton, Jimmy Dalton, for a long time. He's, what you'd say, he's probably one of the most, I suppose, dedicated, talented, sports people that I've met in Ocean Grove, and he's someone that I've got a lot of time for. But he has been known that to know that even though he is preparing racetracks and he's doing a fabulous job from what he's telling us on the podcast, and as I said, very dedicated to his craft and those sorts of things, that he has been training for a few marathons in previous years. And he told me a time when he was cutting up some laps at Shell Road in Ocean Grove, and I don't know if the surface took a bit of a pounding or whatever with all the running that he does, but we have an event that's coming up in Ocean Grove this time of the year, is the Rip to River, but they're going to have to run it in a virtual event. How's your running going, Jimmy, if you've had time for it? And are you looking after the pavement or the grass fields when you're running on the tracks, or have you been wearing out the tracks that you've been running on?
No, it's still kept going. It's the one stable thing that I do have in my life. I think without it, I'd probably struggle a bit. It's a great release for me, and just to get out there and feel a bit of freedom running is something that I do really enjoy. It has been a little bit difficult not having that goal to aim for with a running race coming up or anything like that. But I've sort of found with my training program, just little mini goals. We might do a 5K time trial or a 10K time trial just to keep the motivation going. But definitely without that ultimate goal, it can be a little bit difficult. But it looks like things are starting to free up, and there might be some opportunity over the next few months to start putting some goals forward and head towards a certain goal. But training has continued, probably not to the level it was 3 or 4 years ago with this job and also family and these sorts of things, and the body just getting that little bit older. But I still certainly enjoy it. And the Rip to River virtual, something that is a mini goal for me as well. Unfortunately, it's not going to be the real thing this year, but to be able to try and punch out a quick time over that 2-week period from Boxing Day onwards is something that I'll have a little crack at. And also my daughter's involved at the surf club as well, so she'll have a little crack at the 1.4K Ripper Nipper as well. Yes,
just before Ben asks his next question, that's good that you got involvement there. So the Nippers are all full in force, and hopefully at some stage during the course of the summer that we will see some sort of competition. But it's great to see that you support the community and also support not only racetracks but also those other sports. And you've been a 4-time premiership player under Mark Neeld as well. So it's always good to have you on the program. Ben, I'll let you fire away.
And obviously, track walking would also be a good way to keep fit. I see you've got your smartwatch on there, Jimmy. You get probably about 10,000, 15,000, maybe 20,000 steps every day. So when you do a track walk most mornings, that would probably be good cross training for you as well.
Yeah, it is, Ben. If I punch out a run in a morning and then have a race meet as well, at the end of the day, I'll look at my watch and sometimes I'm up near 30K, which is pretty solid. Definitely around cup time and that sort of thing. yeah, 30K throughout a whole day's pretty standard, which well over 20 odd thousand steps. So I enjoy that aspect as well. It's good recovery. You might do 2 or 3 laps a day of the track, it's just a 2K track. So the numbers certainly add up, and walking back and forth to your office and these sorts of things, it's definitely an active sort of lifestyle being a track manager.
Jimmy, obviously when it comes to the seasons in the Geelong Racing Club, you know, post Geelong Cup, and then obviously the race meeting since, I mean, as I mentioned, I was down there sort of on the 11th dropping someone off, and there was, you know, it looked like there was a little bit of a crowd, and that's good. It sort of started to build up. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into your role, but would you review the Geelong Racing Club sort of season post sort of October as we go into the new year as being successful, and it's the best you could do under the circumstances?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. Like I said before, there was a lot of strict measures that were put in place, and I think the thing that we're really proud of is everyone got on board and realised the situation and the seriousness of it, and just towed the line and all joined in to make sure it was going to work. It was really important that racing did keep going for the whole community and also for the government. And I think we'd look back and I don't think we changed much. It was uncharted territory. We were all sort of flying a bit blind at times, but we certainly did have great guidance from the people up at Racing Victoria, and there was always that support there, and they could answer any questions we did have about preparation with the biosecurity measures that were put in place. So there wouldn't be much at all we would change. We just hope that this is one thing we'll look back on in our life and hope that it doesn't have to occur again, I'm sure.
Absolutely. We've been in uncharted waters, something that we haven't been accustomed to ever before. And, you know, and it's a unique and, unprecedented situation. But we wanted to thank you for coming on the Stoned Heen View Summer Series. It's been episode 39, and I know it's a busy time for you, not just with the family and obviously racing, but you like to get out and do some running, and you're a very dedicated person to your field. And one thing I've learned about Jimmy Dalton, Ben Carbonaro, over many years, he doesn't do things half-hearted. He's a very dedicated professional, and he goes the full hog, and that's what we love about him. And it's great to have you on the podcast. And I have been talking to you about this podcast for a while, so I'm not sure if you've ever been on a podcast, but there you go. We had Liz Ellis last week, the Australian netballer, and we've got a great racing club track manager today in Jimmy Dalton. So thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much, Eno. Thank you, Ben, as well. I'm probably not the caliber of guest you've had in the past. I have listened to a lot of your interviews, and they're brilliant. I think you're doing a great job, and I'm really happy and honoured to be able to speak to you on your podcast today. Thanks for having me. Not
a problem. Hey, Benny Carbonaro, I know you love your racing, but it's great to have Jimmy Dalton on. And I know that you're going to get out to some of the racetracks. Recently, you went to the Colac Cup. Traditionally, you come down here for the Geelong Cup every year, and you stay at my place. But it's great to interview someone like Jimmy Dalton and get an understanding of what the racing club is about, but also track manager, a different role in racing, not just a trainer or a jockey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's given me an idea for my podcast. I might have to get Jimmy to come and talk on mine and talk about how he looks after his tracks.
Good stuff. Well,
anytime, Ben.
Thank you.
Good stuff, Jimmy. We'll have some salsa later, if that's okay, but that's all right. Anyway, you can get in contact with a guest in mind from Sport at any time. You can check out the Stoned Heen View on Facebook, on Instagram. You can check out our podcast on Apple Podcasts, also Spotify, and our launching platform, which is Podbean. And we have a YouTube channel and also a Twitter account called Stoned Heen View. So till next time, this has been our last episode for the summer series for this year, for 2020. It's been a great delight to bring 39 episodes, and we thank Jimmy Dalton for being on the program, and we'll talk to you soon on the Stoned Heen View.